This is one of those weeks where I wish that I had a 2-hour show again, just because
So much has gone on.
I've been a bit active on this particular thing. I rarely deal in absolutes.
You rarely deal in Facebook, too.
Well, yes, but I have this week, and I've been a bit snarky, and I've been issuing absolutes, saying things like, "You're either for strong encryption or you're wrong." And it's been interesting. I've had a couple of discussions with people over the week about this. I went to one of the events that I occasionally get invited to that's kind of radio based.
Yes.
Over the week, and there was some interesting points of view being brought up about the San Bernardino shooter phones and Apple's resistance to the FBI request. I'm going to call it a request, not necessarily an order. The resistance to the request of the FBI to help them break into a phone. And I have issues with this whole
Of course you do.
this whole situation. You know how I feel about security and making sure that our individual security on computers is well guarded. We went on a nearly year-long rant on the whole NSA thing a couple of years ago, and there's some issues with this whole thing, and part of it is I think that this is a real shocker here, but I think that the largest problem for me stems from the apparent dishonesty of the FBI's request. And that's the part that bothers me the most, because you've got people kind of painting this whole situation with Apple versus the FBI as Apple's just doing this as a stunt. They're trying to use it as an advertising platform. They're more concerned about their image than they are about the patriotic duty which they should have to unlock this particular phone. And then, I start to say, no. And then they say, and they've done it 70 times before in the past, which was this sort of argument where they've unlocked phones in the past for individuals.
They were different iOSs, though.
There's a whole lot of differences between this particular instance, and the request was different also. There are some problems with the entire way that this thing is playing out, and it just bothers me. It makes me want to get all ranty on my show. So today is going to be that day.
Woo!
And this is where I was wishing that there was a 2-hour show today. Who knows? Maybe the guest for the teacher show next won't show up, and then I'll just be like, I'll take your hour.
There you go.
No, there was the whole issue here is that, and for those of you who may not know, is that the FBI has requested that Apple build a piece of software or an exploit to defeat the multiple wrong password penalty on the iPhone that was owned by one of the San Bernardino shooters. Now, that is a tall order. Now, on a new phone, that would be very, very tall order, but This is a 5C. It's an older generation phone. Technically, Apple could do this. And they've even admitted, yeah, we could do that, but we're not going to, is their response. The government is asking the Apple to create a piece of software or a defeat that does not currently exist. And they want... Apple's saying, well, we can't do that. We can't trust that this is going to be used the way we want it to.
Right.
And it would break down the trust that our customers have with us. And I think that those are valid, very valid excuses or reasons not to. Now, the FBI is saying, well, it's going to be a one-off, right? You're just writing the software for this particular phone. They're saying you can even make it so that it only works with the particular hardware ID of this particular phone. We're totally cool with that. We would just like some help. Now, this is like Wednesday we're talking about here. And Apple's still saying, no, we're not going to do this.
Right.
We're not going to We're not going to basically betray our customers' confidence that their data and security is, or their data is secure with us. Now, the FBI is saying, well, don't worry about that. You can trust us, right? We're going to make sure that we're the only people with a copy of this particular piece of software. It won't be a big deal. Now, this particular request of assurance, the FBI saying, hey, trust us. The FBI being the same organization that was hacked by a 13-year-old like 6 months ago. I can't really see that as I can trust that they're going to be safe with that. There's a lot of things that would lead you to believe that the FBI and its apparent open sharing with the NSA wouldn't necessarily, that assurance means nothing.
Well, and the FBI is not the only government entity in the world that would like to access iPhones.
Oh, yeah. Now, you also say, well, let's say that they hard code it for that one device.
Right.
How hard do you think it would be to reverse engineer that and modify it so it works with any phone?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a problem. And Apple's real concern here is not necessarily that governments and law enforcement agencies would use this nefariously, mm-hmm. which we know it would.
Yeah, definitely.
But it would get out into the wild, right? Because if it gets out into the wild, then you're going to have your average hacker with the ability to reverse engineer this particular piece of software and make all iOS devices unsafe. Now, there's been some new wrinkles in this story in the last couple of days. Like, while the phone was in law enforcement custody, someone reset the password on that phone. Now, they knew about this a while back, but it only recently came to light that this particular password had been changed. And because that password changed is the reason they can't access any of the data on it, because it resets the encryption keys. The San Bernardino County IT, forensic IT, is who did this, right? They identified that it was a person who acted on their own accord while they had the phone, reset the password on the phone in an attempt to get into the data, and in doing so, broke the backups of the phone, broke the encryption keys, so now the data is stuck. And that's why the FBI is asking for help. Because Apple had responded, they had asked Apple for help, and they're like, well, why didn't you just take it back to the shooter's Wi-Fi hotspot, right? Because you had access to get into the phone. All you had to do is take it back to a known network, and it would have ran a backup. And had that backup run, Apple could then give you the data contents of that backup. But getting the data out of the phone directly is something that Apple's not willing to do, because that's the part that's going to basically, they don't want to put a hole in their phone as far as security is concerned when they don't need to. Now, let's address those 70 previous instances of Apple helping out law enforcement with data from phones. One, they were much older phones where they didn't support the encryption types that are happening now.
Right.
Apple had the keys to all of the 4 phones and the first generation 5s. So they could decrypt any phone previous to the 5C. Starting with the 5C, Apple did one-sided keys where they basically, you created the encryption key, Apple never got a copy of it. There was nothing they could do on their end to decrypt it in a time that is reasonable. Now with the new phones, with the 6s and newer, any of the phones that have the thumbprint sensors in them, that is a hardware encryption, meaning it's much more difficult than the previous phones. Even without the keys, you could decrypt those in a reasonable amount of time, but you cannot at all do it on the new phones in any reasonable amount of time. And there's a fail-safe that's built in. This fail-safe says if you try to unlock the phone and you fail X number of times, the phone basically self-destructs. All the data's gone. So this is the thing that going forward that law enforcement would really like a help with, to disable that self-destruct mechanism within the phones. And Apple's still saying no. Now, I think that Apple's right for doing this. I think that they should absolutely not back down on encryption. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Computer Guru Show. If you did, please consider sharing it with your friends and subscribing to this channel if you haven't already. Your subscription helps us reach new audiences and expand the show in new directions. Please also consider supporting us on Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can help the Computer Guru Show expand into a longer format, as well as support the production of new content for this channel. Links are in the description below, and thank you again. We'll see you next week.